well, welcome to the second portion of the program. I'd like to introduce to you Mark Weatherwax. He is the Advisory Board on Disability Services Chairman, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about the board. There you go.
Yeah, the Advisory Board of Disability Services is a board that is a classic conduct for days,
Just careful level.
okay. But anyway, I try to get from the city and to officials and people with disabilities. We, the first time reading on these things, so we feel service providers throughout the members of the board are very lead on that, that's what I want to say. So thank you for being here and interesting questions for Asia.
Thanks, Mark. I'm sure you get down. Earlier this year, when we had talked about tracking on a program for October, which is the Disabilities Month, I was doing some research and I thought, how can we make this exciting, engaging, and really draw people to the conversation? And I had a whole list of ideas. I was going through and I was Googling various things, and I stumbled on an interview with Becky. And I thought, oh boy, this really resonated with me. There were a lot of things that she said that I thought, this is the message that we want to share. And a couple of things she said. One was she talked about all the barriers she has to overcome before she even leaves the house in the morning. And we don't think about that when you think about a person with a disability or a different need, or people that are really dedicated and motivated to work, but they have to overcome barriers and problem solve even before leaving the house. And the other thing she said was she really thinks it's important to strengthen the word disability so we can continue the conversation and not leave people out. And Becky is an international motivational speaker. She has an extensive resume. And I'm going to pass that out to you. Earlier. This includes maybe 10 talks and so many other things. We really value her input, and we're so appreciative, and we're looking forward to your message, and we are so happy that you're here. Thank you for making the trip. We appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. I usually like to start my presentations asking if anyone has met a little person before. Raise your hands. All right. Got a few hands, but not everyone. So one of my biggest passions in life is by being my best self and also encouraging authentic representation in the media is trying to get people to understand that people with dwarfism or little people are humans and we want to be treated like humans. So I was born in a family where there's no history of dwarfism, and this happens 80% of the time. My father is actually 6 feet 4 inches, and my mother is about 5 feet 1 inch, but there's still no history of dwarfism in the family. When I was first born, I was born at a hospital where there was nobody in the delivery room who even knew anything about dwarfism. There happened to be someone who worked at the hospital who had seen one other patient with dwarfism in the hospital's past since they started there. They really didn't have much information or advice to share with my parents. My parents were scared. They were nervous. They did not know what that meant for my future or their future. My dad grew up as a social worker, and he had a background in trying to help people solve problems. But this was a problem, well, he thought at that point in time, because there were no positive portrayals in the media, that he didn't know how to solve. And it required relying on the little information that existed out there back in 1984. But he dove his head into as many books with the medical terminology, as much information as he could find. We were also given a referral to a geneticist who was at a hospital nearby where I was born. So the moment I was discharged from the hospital with my mother, we went over to the hospital where this geneticist worked. When we first got to check in at the appointment at the geneticist's office, we were told by the receptionist that we needed to get directions to get to that person's office. And the way we got there was following signs that say birth defects. This was on the bottom floor of the hospital. Then get in the elevator and there will be a sign for the floor called birth defects. And then there will be another sign when you get off the elevator called birth defects. And then your genetic counselor will be there to greet you. We thought, why aren't we just being truthful and telling it how it is? And say, this is a geneticist who can help people. But the word birth defects is unsettling with a lot of people, just like even the word disability, some people are fearful of using. So my parents ended up writing a letter to that hospital and said, you need to change the sign. It's not fair for families to come in there already feeling nervous, thinking that a geneticist can give them some sound advice. And this is how we experienced that first appointment, and it breaks the level of trust. And I think that can be similar to even in the workplace. People are fearful of disclosing their disability, especially if it's not apparent, because they see how people with physical disabilities like me are treated in society and in the workplace, and they don't want to come forward. So just from an early age, my parents were so great at advocating on my behalf until I was able to get to a point to advocate on my own behalf. It wasn't easy. After about 6 months, I was able to find, when I grew up in the Boston area, we were able to find a doctor down in the Baltimore area who specialized just in dwarfism. Something that's common with people with dwarfism is sleep apnea. And this doctor was taking patients for a sleep study that he could use for research that could help other doctors around the country. And my parents signed us up for it in order to get an appointment with this doctor. People came from around the world to see him. They were willing to wait 8 hours in the waiting room because they knew he knew what he was talking about. And the first day we got there to the appointment to meet him, there was a waiting room full of people, and my parents were able to be seen by him right away. He saw the ghostly look on their faces, and he wanted to be a resource and answer all the questions and concerns that they had about me. And from that point forward, my parents knew that it was okay if we waited 8 hours at those appointments because of what he did for us on that day. He restored hope in my parents and knew that it wasn't going to be an easy journey, but they were capable of handling it. And one of the best pieces of advice he gave was to keep her in the same school system as best you can. I know a lot of families cannot control that. They can't always keep their child in the same school system if they move because of jobs or for family reasons. But it's really important to have that consistency. And that led to them working with another family in our town. And there was someone who was in my class from preschool to 7th grade. She became an ally. She does not have dwarfism, but she was able to stick up for me whenever maybe there was some potential bullying because of my size. I am hard of hearing in my right ear, so it's very possible that I didn't hear sometimes when people were making fun of me. But I truly believe that she was also there to protect me and support me. I participated in sports, just like my average height peers, soccer, sailing, skiing, swimming. There had to be some adjustments, but there was nothing that made me feel othered. I was still part of the team. So for on the swim team, for example, I would do all of the laps that were required for practice. But when it came to swim meets, where it was more competitive, I was given the opportunity to go 25 yards instead of 50. So it felt like I was still going at the level of my peers. For sailing, there weren't any major adjustments. It just became a little bit more challenging once I became older and it became more of a competitive sport in college, but it didn't stop me from participating. Skiing, I participated more on a leisurely path. I was never really part of a competitive team, but in that case, even if I would fall skiing, I'm so close to the ground. Fortunately, I never injured myself. And it just was important for me to be part of the team, part of the community. I didn't think that I needed to be part of this organization called Little People America, which also became an online resource for my parents once online was a place to go for information. And I thought, okay, it's cool that there's an organization out there, people like me, but I'm so embedded in my community and I'm used to being the only different person in my community, my group of friends, and I'm okay with that. But things changed when I got to high school. A lot of my girlfriends started talking about dating. They didn't think that I could be around because they thought that I would ruin their dating game. I also lost the ability to walk before 10th grade, and it was due to spinal cord compression. So even though when I was sitting down earlier, I'm the same height as a lot of average height people. It's just that I have shorter arms and legs. Because my body's smaller overall, a lot of my organs are more compact. So my spinal column was pinching up against my spinal cord, which was what was preventing me from being able to walk more than a few feet without falling. The hardest thing for me during that period of time was being told that I was going to miss school. I really felt like I was on the path with my peers in all honors classes, doing really well, going to continue to excel through high school, and I'm told that I'm going to miss at least 29 days of school. It was even recommended that I stay back a year so I could take off the full year to recover, but I did not want to do that. Even though the doctor had recommended for my parents to have me in the same school system from preschool on, nothing was more important to me than staying even in the same grade. It's that same group of people that I was growing up with. Even though I was in a school sometimes with people in a grade below or above, I didn't know them as well. So I made sure that I still stayed on track after major back surgery. Most people may have thought to take the whole year off, but that wasn't what I wanted. Fortunately, I was given the ability to walk again with extensive physical therapy. And I unfortunately had to go back a level in classes with that sacrifice that I made to stay. It was honors college preparatory. Some people may not think that was a big deal, but it was a big deal for me. As we got closer to senior year, there were some AP and honors classes that I was able to continue on with, and I ultimately applied to 9 schools, and I chose Providence College in Rhode Island. One of the reasons I chose Providence College was while I was on tour there was a person with dwarfism in the cafeteria. So she would be a year above me. And I thought, it's not common to see someone with dwarfism in this environment or in any environment. So this makes me feel comfortable that this community, this school environment has had at least one exposure to a person with dwarfism. And it really transformed my experience because there was just that level of, oh, we've seen someone like you. They've taught us a little bit. You have the ability to teach us and we can work together. I got involved in this program called Urban Action. So it's similar to Habitat for Humanity, where we were allowed to go to school a few days early and move in as freshmen. There were about 150 people in that group. I ended up meeting my best friend because one day we were walking back to our dorms and she waited up for me. And just the simple gesture of waiting up for me when you can run ahead with the crowd. I joked with her that we were going to be best friends forever, and she just laughed. So we text every day, and we still are very good friends. It wasn't easy that first year of college because you are assigned to be roommates with people who you don't know very well. There was one person who I got along with on the phone great. We definitely had a lot in common. I didn't feel the need to tell her I had dwarfism. There was a shock factor when we arrived at school. She was not happy. She didn't know how to act or react. And something that she could have done is just ask simple questions that would allow her to understand. We have a lot in common on the phone. Nothing should change just because my appearance is a little different. But then by my sophomore year, I was able to become roommates with the person who continues to be my close friend. But even our junior year, we're getting ready. You have to have more than 2 people to go on to the on-campus apartments. And my friend was on the swim team, so she had some people that could be in the on-campus apartments with us if we went in the lottery for a 6-man apartment. But there was one other person who's not as active on the swim team that was part of that group of friends. And she admitted that she wasn't comfortable being left at the apartment with me and didn't want to pursue that opportunity. Fortunately, we had some other people who came to us, and we had a 4-man apartment, and the next year a 6-man. But there are moments like this where you just want to question, what is it that makes people feel uncomfortable? There are so many questions they could just ask, take away the elephant in the room, and hopefully understand that we have more in common. And as Michelle was saying in my introduction, there are so many problems that I need to solve before getting out of the house in the morning. I'm not going to put that burden on other people. And as we kind of talk a little bit about my career journey, I never really even asked for accommodations because of that same feeling of not wanting to burden or be another reason for people to not let you feel welcome. So as a marketing major in college, I started to think about what I wanted to do towards the end of my college career. And I thought, you know what, maybe I want to work in an ad agency. They have a lot of influence and it seems interesting. There was an article in a Boston Business Journal that said the top ad agencies in Boston. And I sent resumes to all 100 of them. One person responded, and they were at an ad agency called Allied Integrated Marketing. And they are the general public. They are the intermediary between the general public and movie companies, filling advanced screening of movies before they come out for the wide release. The goal was to find target audiences for movies like Happy Feet, try to get as many people to show up to this advanced screening. People love advanced screenings and that feeling of being invited to something exclusive. And then those families could send notes to their friends who can hopefully help with ticket sales after the movie's released. And during the advanced screenings, we would write notes on how people reacted, see if the studios needed any feedback before the wide release. There was also a rule where the audience members could not bring their cell phone. This was back before iPhones, but the flip phones that have the camera, and there's a liability factor because these are advanced screenings, not wide release. Even now, those screenings, people cannot be recording. The people who had their phones were so nervous that they were going to miss the screening experience. So they found a way to go bring their phones back to their car and come back. Just watching how much the entertainment industry and that experience influences people got me thinking that I need to learn more about this industry that influences all portrayals, good or bad. And maybe at some point I can get more specific and talk about the importance of changing how people with dwarfism and all disabilities are portrayed in the media. And that led to an internship at the NBC affiliate in Providence in promotions and publicity. And then I was asked actually to be a stand-in for Peter Dinklage on the movie Underdog. It was a Disney film they were filming in Providence at the time. And that opportunity seemed awesome, just another way to learn about the entertainment business. But what happens with the stand-in is when movie sets are being set up for the actual filming time, there are a lot of name actors, even children, who require a certain amount of schooling even while they're on set and working. And having stand-ins gives the production staff the opportunity to accommodate the children to go to school and have people there who are similar heights to the actors for the lighting setup. And then once they're ready to film, the students, the kids, everyone comes in and does the acting. As I thought more and more about it, even though it can be a lucrative thing, it wasn't something I was super passionate about, but I was open to trying it. Unfortunately, that opportunity conflicted with the last 2 weeks of college. Nothing was more important after my parents paying for an expensive college education than finishing school. But I took that opportunity to network as much as possible with the casting director who I had already met. And I asked if I could help with the casting of extras throughout the summer, since it was filming the summer after my senior year. Sometimes I would call up to 300 people a day just to show up to a crowd scene in front of the Capitol building in Providence. Some people were willing to cancel their life-threatening doctor's appointments just to be on a movie set, because it's not as common for filming to happen in Providence, Rhode Island versus New York or LA, larger cities. Again, started to realize this industry impacts a lot of people and they take it very seriously. Right after that film finished, I had the opportunity to move out to Los Angeles. My parents told me, you need a job and a place to live and we'll support you. I found a place to live, I found a job to work for a talent manager who also happens to have dwarfism. The minute I got to California, I found out the talent manager was not going to commit and I didn't have a job. Fortunately, I still had a place to stay, and I convinced my parents that I would treat every day going forward as a job looking for a job. I ended up sending out 1,000 resumes, went on 100 interviews over the course of 4 months. There were days where I had up to 4 interviews a day, driving all around Los Angeles, probably looking frazzled. It's also fortunate, it's also possible that I was terrible at interviewing, but nobody was there to mentor me to tell me that. And I was just under the assumption that it was because of my short stature, I did not write it on my resume, that people weren't willing to hire me, even though my resume got me in the door for those 100 interviews. Looking back, I wish that I just put I was a person with dwarfism on my resume. Yes, maybe that would lead to fewer interviews, but it would allow me to be in a room where people are somewhat comfortable because they know who's walking in. They won't say things like, you're so cute, how did you get here? I drive just like everyone else. I just have accommodations like pedal extensions. The assumption that I need all of these extra accommodations. But in most cases, it's just a step stool. Maybe at my desk so my feet aren't dangling, or at the sink in the bathroom so I can wash my hands. And after just feeling like I was going up against a wall and not finding any success, I thought I should go through some temporary placement agencies that are specific to the entertainment industry, because it was still something I was passionate about. This is also an industry that's extremely competitive, so I'm mindful of that too. As I share my story, I think a lot of people may face obstacles during the interview process in an industry that's so competitive, but I don't think it's the same exact experience. I think some people would have found success faster, or maybe they would have given up. But with these temporary placement agencies, I was able to go and show these employers that I could just work. Even as a temporary employee, I was getting paid. I worked at the Hallmark Channel for about a month and a half. Then I worked at a place called Trailer Park where they make trailers for movies. And then a few weeks later, I was given the opportunity to work at the largest talent agency in Los Angeles and now the world, where they represent sports, actors, writers, producers, directors. The opportunity was in the Hispanic marketing department. Unfortunately, I took French in school, so it wasn't too beneficial at that point in time for me to have a background in French. But one of the reasons I took French was I really wanted to go to France, and I did that in high school, but that was the only reason. And I wish I had pursued Spanish. But because I was working for a woman who had faced adversity in her life as a Latina woman, she wasn't willing to give up on me too fast. HR called about a month in and said, your time is up. And she was able to advocate on my behalf and give me an opportunity to continue working there. And we hired someone who does speak Spanish, who was able to answer the phone calls and do the things that required Spanish speaking. And she became a mentor to me as well. As time went on, there became more opportunities available in the entertainment marketing department. So we would work with brands on integration in entertainment properties. Take Harley Davidson, for example. We would look at magazines to see celebrities who are riding motorcycles, and if it wasn't a Harley Davidson, we'd send them. They won't always ride it and be pictured with it. They may gift it to a parent, but that's something that we're willing to take the risk on. Moet Champagne, we would find opportunities in movies or TV shows, not just product placement where you say use this at any point in the movie or TV show. Find a moment where it's like a Moet moment where you talk about the product and then we'll let you use it for the film. eBay, it's all about the theme of winning. So people would be able to go on the eBay site, even though you're paying money, you're excited when you win an auction item on eBay. We scheduled a bus tour with comedians who went up and down the coast of California to find people who are winners at things like yo-yo and flip cup and other fun activities. We even were able to brand a film, a short film, that was based off of a product that was sold on eBay that could then be submitted to film festivals. The agency had all the power, influenced all of how Hollywood acts, and a lot can be done in that place. There was a training program for people who may be an agent assistant for a year, and then they were allowed to move up, but they have to go back into the mailroom. So you're an assistant, and you go back into the mailroom to see how you can survive, and then you may get promoted a year later. But thinking about the mailroom experience, the opportunity was really never offered to me, but it would have been very challenging for me to get into a program like that, required to fill people's mailboxes. We're around town, you never know what height someone's mailbox is going to be, or even the safety of showing up at someone's house. A lot of people in Hollywood have these big gated communities that they're in. There was nothing that they were willing to do to accommodate, to make it a more enjoyable experience that I would want to do. But those conversations didn't even come up. It was expected that I was just going to continue to work there as an assistant. So I was in the entertainment marketing department for 2.5 years. Then there was an opportunity to work in the comedy touring department. Most people who are assistants, especially if they don't want to pursue a career as an agent, are given the opportunity to move on after a year. But I was so scared of finding that next opportunity. And as glamorous as it may seem or sound, it's a tough lifestyle. And it just wasn't what I wanted. But I know that I learned a lot during my time. Towards the end of my time, about 4 years in, people did start asking me what it was I was passionate about. And I've always said, I'm passionate about changing what we see in the media, because it affects how people like me are treated in society. And it even stems back to parents when they're at the hospital, deciding whether or not to keep their child who is different. That decision may be based off of what they consumed in the media up until that point, if they haven't seen anyone else with that diagnosis anywhere else in life. I started to get the support of pursuing a panel discussion, which happened actually in October for Disability Employment Awareness Month back in 2011. And I brought people together who are actors and writers and producers who also happen to have disabilities. They had a healthy discussion. Unfortunately, the agency only had about 4 people who work at the agency attend, and I got other people to attend from around town. But it was clear it wasn't a priority there. One of the partners came up to me and told me, my father lived with me for 8 years before he passed away. He had lost his legs to cancer, and I took care of him. I was thankful that he shared that story. I feel that a lot of people share those types of stories with people like me who have physical disabilities because they know we can't hide them. But I wanted to know, have you told anyone else this story? You have all of these clients, very high profile clients who could create content based on that story that could help others with similar lived experiences. And he just responded by saying, no, no one else here knows. And we kind of left it at that. I had an opportunity to then go work in television casting at CBS Television Studios. I was there for about a year. The person who recruited me to work there wanted me to be there. The person who I was also going to work for, was a job required working for 2 people, did not want me to be there. And it was clear from the beginning. And I didn't get the proper mentorship and support. They know I came with the perspective and the passion for including, or at least thinking to include, more people with disabilities in auditions and roles on TV shows. But they weren't willing to do the search for more people with disabilities unless a writer specifically said disability in the script. And most writers, they have to have that lived experience and be surrounded by someone with a disability in order to be influenced to write about it. Again, it kind of felt like I was going up against the wall, not getting the support I needed. After putting in my time, I felt. And after a year in that position, I knew that it wasn't a comfortable situation and I wasn't getting the mentorship I deserved or needed. And I made the tough decision to move back home to Boston. My roommate at the time, he was an actor. He was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And he didn't want to put the burden on me as his caretaker. And I understood that. And even though he meant the world to me, I knew that he needed to go home to Georgia, where he was from. And it was a good time for me to go home to Boston. It was not an easy decision to make. This was back in November 2012. I left just to go home for a little bit to decide if I really wanted to leave the apartment. But every time my parents would bring up LA, I would bawl. And I knew that I just wasn't ready to go back, even though it was tough to actually get all my stuff and come home. I dealt with my own stigma of being an adult with a disability living at home. But I started to learn that even though I didn't get to a certain point in my career, people still wanted to hear my story. My sister was a creative writing teacher at a middle school, and she said, I have all these students, I talk about you all the time. Why don't you just come and share your story? And I thought, I don't know if anyone wants to hear my story. I'm in a weird spot right now. But it was therapeutic for me to share my story and not just worry about what level I got to in my career as an assistant in Hollywood. There were other parts of my story and contributions that I bring to life that could help other children. And that led to me learning that there are a lot of students with disabilities who struggle, where their families can't control keeping them in the same school system. And I thought, why don't I go talk to the administrators, tell them the accommodations I had growing up, and then talk to the whole student body, share my story, allow people to ask me questions about my life, with hopes that that can help the way that they interact and don't negatively react to that incoming student with a disability. That eventually led to a trip to Kenya. I was asked to help start a Little People organization in Nairobi, Kenya. It was an amazing experience. It was confirmed about 24 hours in advance. It was scary. My family wanted to make sure there was at least one other group of people going from the US who I could travel with. Even though I'm a very independent traveler, going to a place like Kenya can be risky. I learned just the appreciation for the small things that people there have and the need for confidence and courage. They had the support of the senator of Nairobi and even the president of Kenya. It was a pivotal time to be there because it was when Nelson Mandela passed as well. But it was powerful. It was a great experience. I came back from that excited and driven to do even more. And that's when I was given the opportunity to do my first TEDx talk. I was also asked to be recruited to go work at the Actors Union in New York City. And it was a great time because I love speaking. I do it as much as I can. But it can also be isolating sometimes if you're just a one-person show. So having that to complement speaking, working in the diversity department at the Actors Union, I was able to learn about how to advocate for all the underrepresented groups. And more visibility hopefully allows to more positive portrayals. My boss in that job, we had previously met at that first panel event I discussed in 2011, and we just stayed in touch and we networked. He always offered the best feedback while we were working together. There were times where I would make a mistake. One example is there was a Performers with Disabilities committee, and there are some deaf actors who are on that committee. Our department was both in LA and New York. I was in the New York position. Nobody really gave me the information or the heads up that you need to book interpreters for the meeting. And I thought, all right, I guess this meeting's just happening. I don't know what to say or do. Of course, my boss was very frustrated because he thought that I would know the process and be able to book interpreters. And he had to type out the entire meeting so that person could see what was being communicated about. After that meeting, we talked about what happened. But he didn't just say, you made a mistake, you're never going to be able to do better. He was great at delivering feedback by saying, you made a mistake, let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about how to do better in the future. So the feedback was, we need to talk about what happened, but let's talk about what we can do better in the future. And that continued to work with our relationship. We had a very good relationship, but he advocated for me to move up in positions, and he got pushback. And he started getting frustrated, started looking for other work. I couldn't imagine working somewhere where he wasn't. And the one great thing, just as far as accommodations go, that was the first job where I was actually asked, what accommodations do you need? There was an ergonomic consultant to make sure I had the right setup. I just had my desk chair, step stool, worked great. Step stools in the bathroom that I would use, step stools in the kitchen in order for me to access the sink in the kitchen. It was in the 5th floor of a building in Lincoln Center in New York. I wasn't accessing all of the kitchens, but one of the administrative people who was responsible for accommodations woke up in the middle of the night once and realized, what if Becky wants to go to those other kitchens or those other bathrooms on the floor? There's nothing that should prevent her from doing that. So she was able to provide step stools in those areas as well, even though that was going above and beyond the reasonable accommodation. And I appreciated someone else thinking outside the box for me because it wouldn't have been something that I would ask for myself. But after about 3.5 years working in that environment, I think the biggest complaint is just there was no support or room for growth. I was asked to work at the organization that I work for now, helping corporations with their disability inclusion practices. Another reason why this was an important shift was I finally did get involved in the organization Little People of America in college, and I had many relationships related or with people who have dwarfism, but most relationships, people you connect with, may not live in the same geographic area. I met my husband actually not at a convention, but it was through Facebook, but through mutual friends. And we had been doing long distance from New York to Milwaukee. Big difference in both cities, but we had to figure out, after about 1.5 years of talking, what was next? Who was going to have to make the job change in order to make this work? Or was it going to work at all if we couldn't control that? And this opportunity allowed me to be in a job where I could work remotely. So I could move from New York to Milwaukee without having to worry about finding a job there and having the ability to travel wherever I needed to help corporations with disability inclusion practices. So fast forward, we got engaged about 6 months after I got this job, and I then felt a little more confident about moving. We ended up getting married in 2019 in my home area, Boston, Massachusetts. The pandemic happened. We went on our honeymoon actually right before the pandemic got crazy in Maui. So there were people on our flight home from Maui who had already been sanitizing the seats, and they were sitting in the wrong seats, which were ours. So we didn't have to worry about sanitizing because they had just done it. And then we get home for a day, my husband goes into work and then is told that he's going to be remote too for the time being. They thought 2 weeks, it continued on and on and on. Once we got to the summer, my parents actually happened to be in Hawaii at the same time, so we kind of honeymooned with them, but we had our space. They were still in Hawaii until July. They were meaning to come home in April, but they stayed till July because they were worried about even a layover and the exposure with their high-risk health. So they stayed till July. A few weeks later, my mom's friend from college lives in Chicago. She had offered to drive me from Chicago to Boston because she was going to do a family vacation on Cape Cod. And I thought, great, this is an excuse to go see my family. I got a new nephew during that time period. And it was an opportunity for just me to catch up with everyone because I didn't know when I'd see them again. Right after we confirmed that I was going to ride with this lady, still didn't really know how or when I was going to come back to Milwaukee, but I would have figured it out. The lady said that her son was coming in the car and there wasn't room for me. And that's when things started to hit me hard. When will I see my family again? So my husband and I started looking at houses in Boston, and we ended up buying a house sight unseen. We joked that the people were very tall, so we had a lot of step stools around our house. My dad and sister did look at the houses. My sister looked at it the same day she put an offer on her house, which was only a mile away. And the only reason we were able to get the house we got is because we're better with finances and had a bigger budget. But it was an opportunity to move home, start thinking about settling down and starting a family. We moved in September. In November, I was able to get pregnant. We waited until February to tell people that I was pregnant because there are different scenarios that can happen. 2 people with my type of dwarfism called achondroplasia. 25% chance they could be average height. I could have a child, like everyone's height here. 25% chance they could be double dominant, meaning both of our dominant genes come together and the baby does not have a great survival rate. Some people, for religious reasons, may carry that baby a little bit longer and even meet them the day they're born, knowing that it's not going to be a long time together. And then 50% chance they would have 1 copy of the achondroplasia gene, which is what my husband and I both have. So once we found out our baby was going to have 1 copy of the achondroplasia gene, we were ready to tell the world. We didn't want to know the gender. I did end up finding out the gender because I read all the notes that the ultrasound doctors had. This was around the June timeframe. He was born in August. Said everything was in place. But it was right before my baby shower and I just waited. I didn't tell anyone. I just told my husband if he wanted to know. But we still thought there could be a chance that they could be wrong. We'll see. I went 39 weeks in 1 day, so a full-term pregnancy. Because of my smaller body, we have to have C-sections just because there's no other way to do it. And because of some spinal stenosis related to even the residual effects of my back surgery when I was 15, it didn't make sense to do an epidural. So we did a general anesthesia. It was a quick process. It's scary. Anesthesia can be scary, especially with people with dwarfism because all your organs and everything are more compact. But went through it, felt like I was only asleep for like a half hour. Didn't get to meet my son right away because he had to go straight to the NICU. Once I woke up and the medicine wore off a bit, they were able to roll my bed and I got to meet my son. He was on supplemental oxygen. He was about a day, 24 hours on oxygen. And then the nurses in the NICU tried to perform a car seat test. And unfortunately, he didn't pass. So it meant that he needed to spend some more time in the NICU, closely monitored. And anytime you have desaturations in oxygen, you have to wait like 4 days before you can decide if he's ready to get discharged. So 23 days later, we found out he had a sleep study. We found out that he needed supplemental oxygen at home. We then were told that we need to take him home in a car bed since he wasn't able to sit properly in a car seat because his neck control wasn't that great. So anytime he'd be in the car seat, his neck would be blocking his airways. 3 months later, November, we were able to do another sleep study. They didn't need to use supplemental oxygen for the sleep study, but his numbers still weren't very high. We were told to keep him in the car bed as well. We kept going. We found out we could take the oxygen off during the day, so it gave us a little bit of relief. It's challenging, as much as humble as we want to be, carrying a baby around with all these cords, and especially during the pandemic, you're afraid to go anywhere or do anything. We were told after that sleep study, take it off during the day. We continued to use it. They said, let's book another sleep study 3 months later, exactly on the day. I was so excited. The night before the sleep study, we're going to Boston. We're staying in a hotel. I hadn't stayed in a hotel in so long. We brought him. First time we stayed in a hotel. And then we had some appointments during the day at the hospital in Boston. And that night we were scheduled for another sleep study. At each of the sleep studies, we also had a car seat test. And he needed to be in the car seat to see if he could pass that test before they laid him down for the night. Unfortunately, there was an accident at the hospital and he stopped breathing. He had been without oxygen for 20 minutes. So we had to make a tough decision after a week and a half in the NICU or the ICU to let him go. He ended up passing in my arms. We were in the room for 3 hours and 8:09, he was actually born on August 9th. It was 8:09 p.m. when he passed. I tell this because it's now a new element to my disability identity, dealing with mental health through the grief from the loss of my infant son. So I want people to know that you never know what people are going through. Even those with physical disabilities, we can appear to be so strong. And even up until this point, I had the support of my family to be the strongest person. And I didn't let those little comments, points, laughs, and stares get to me. But then when an added layer comes, it hits you a little differently. So really, it's important to ask questions, don't make assumptions, and give people the space to talk if they want to. And it may take them a while. I think what we've noticed is, even with employee resource groups, some people may join as someone who identifies as an ally. I don't have a disability. But once you find that level of comfort, you can start to disclose other parts of your identity. And that's why we need to strengthen the word disability and understand that it's just part of the human experience. We don't want people to feel bad for us. We just want to be a part of society. So thank you.